We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
You just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Sam Monson here as ever. No Steve still. He's on a beach in Massachusetts or something. I'm not actually sure where he is on vacation, but something like that. So we drafted in the great Anthony Treash. Welcome to the show.
I actually dethroned Steve. I
Yeah.
took over his seat. He's not coming back, guys.
No, Wally pipped by Treash right here on the show.
That kind of does sound enjoyable, though, the beach in Massachusetts right now.
Yeah. So he'll actually get a seat back because I'm out of here the next show next week.
Where are you going?
So we're heading down to Florida for a vacation with the family. But that's very hot right now. Yeah. Very hot. To the point where, like, even the water isn't really helping. You know what I mean? Like, the sea is warm. Like, that kind of thing. Whereas at least in Massachusetts, the water is cold. It's the Atlantic, right? It's like it's straight off like a continental shelf and into, like, cold water. So you're fine. You can just get in the water, and it's not that hot. Whereas Florida right now is pretty warm, pretty baking hot.
I mean, either way, it's better than Cincinnati. I love Cincinnati more than anybody else here, I would say, but it is horrendous right now. It's just so muggy. I mean, if I walk into the office, I got to bring another shirt.
Yeah, it's rough.
I'm sweating through it, and I'm not a sweater. But
No, it's bad, and it's like it's before the last couple of days where we got rain. It was like dry as well, so it was barbecuing anything on the ground. Like, you had plants growing, not anymore. All that kind of stuff.
This is actually a weather podcast.
It really is.
Yeah,
it's a good start.
We're talking weather.
Let's get some housekeeping out of the way, though, because we've been running this thing for the last few shows that we really like the idea of, which is listeners essentially telling us where they're wrong and betting that something is going to happen over the course of the season. And we're going to have a running tally of, like, listeners versus the show of bets that are going to take place. So the couple that we had out so far, one guy nailed it. A guy called Jake Peters had this perfect plan of gave us the bet, gave us the terms. Beautiful. So he said that the Patriots draft essentially is being hated on way more than it should be. And his proof is that he thinks that the top 3 picks for the Patriots will add more war this season than the top 3 picks from the Ravens, excluding David Ojabo, who'll be, redshirted and won't count. So their top 3 picks, he thinks that the Patriots will actually have more success this year by PFF WAR, which I think is a really fair way of doing it because it's not just, playing time, right? It's like those guys will actually be better this year than the Ravens' top 3. So I like that. That's one we accepted. We had another one that said Jalen Hurts will have the highest PFF passing grade, we've altered it to, of any qualifying NFC East quarterback 2022. So he'll have the best passing grade of any of those guys. Good bet. And then the one that I want to accept on behalf of Steve, you can be part of this. A guy called Jake Botticello, I think. Bills' offensive line, we're hating on them too much. Where was his exact email? He says, Sam, Steve, I think you guys are grossly underrating the Bills' offensive line. I bet they're in the top 5 PFF graded offensive lines this year. So there's the official wager up on the YouTube show. Look at that, our own seal. Wax seal we got.
Dude, Steve looks like he's an 80-year-old professor.
The beard, the beard, I'm not sure it does him too much. I don't think it helps too much with the silhouette, the old Steve beard. But anyway, that's our seal. So Bills will have a top 5 offensive line in PFF grade in 2022. What do you think?
Oh, so I mean, I want to start up top first, because at first I saw this on Twitter, the Patriots one, and I was like, oh, this guy's crazy.
Yeah.
But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, actually, he might be onto something here. I think long term, I love what the Ravens did, and I think what New England did is going to come back to bite them. But I mean, just knowing how this metric works, I think those guys in New England are going to get more opportunity, and I think. I love Tyler Linderbaum, but I think he's going to struggle because this is completely a different offensive system for him to learn. And, just with the play strength issues, I think that could maybe drop him down a little bit. Maybe Cam Jurgens, he's thrown in there. He succeeds. I don't know. It's interesting. Going to this one, though, what was his name?
Jake Botticello for the
Jake
Bills
Botticello. I love that last name. It sounds Italian.
I assume it is, which is why I'm pronouncing it that way. If it isn't, then I'm just butchering his surname.
He should change it and start pronouncing it Botticello. Jake, I love you, but I think you're crazy. This interior is what really, really scares. Even right tackle, Spencer Brown, I mean, he struggled last year as a rookie. He was objectively not good. And Roger Saffold, I think he was one of the better guards over the last decade, excluding last year. Last year's where everything kind of came crumbling down for him, and his age started to show. I mean,
a lot of injuries. Like he's got a lot of wear on a lot of miles on the clock for him.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think he's going to really hold up there. I think, week one, they get Los Angeles. Aaron Donald against Roger Saffold.
Yeah.
Aaron Donald's going to I don't need to elaborate on that. You know what he's going to do to that interior. And then right tackle again, Spencer Brown. I think this is more likely to be a bottom 5 graded unit than a top 5.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it lands in the middle, which has been the whole point. I think the Bills would be shocked if their offensive line was a top 5 graded unit at PFF. Like, I think they've deliberately not allocated that kind of resource to the offensive line because they know what we've been preaching for ages, which is you just want an average offensive line across the board. Like we had Jeff Schwartz on the last show, same thing, right? Just get 5 guys that don't suck, and then you're in good shape. I think that's kind of what the Bills have been trying to do when they've assembled this offensive line, when they brought in the depth. Like they haven't gone after superstars. They've just tried to find 5 guys that are okay, and I think that's a good approach, but it means by definition, you're an average group, right? So you're probably ranking like 15, 16, 17 in the league. And then depending on whether you get good years out of those guys or bad years out of those guys, that's going to determine how far outside of that like dead smack middle range you're going to be.
And the problem is, you look at the starting 5, 3 of the 5 have really, really low floors.
Right.
Like concerning floors. We talked about Saffold. We talked about Spencer Brown. Ryan Bates, right guard. He has 6 career starts to his name over 4 years. I mean, he does not have ample starting experience to him. Now, granted, it was okay when he was on the field, right? I mean, Chicago wanted him, right? Buffalo ended up bringing him back on the qualifying offer. But, I mean, you can't comfortably say Ryan Bates is going to be a good average guard, just given what he's done throughout his career, which is largely nothing. And, again, the other couple other spots, that's where I'm very cautious to say I would invest. I'm not, buying stock in the Bills' offensive line like Jake is. But hopefully Jake's right. What's the bet here?
So it's not. There's no terms yet in terms of what people win. There's one guy actually that offered $100 to a charity of our choice if he wins, and we give $100 to St. Jude's if he wins. Sorry, and if we win, we get the $100 to our charity. So there are people offering terms, but there's no necessary, wager. It's just like, I think you guys are full of it, and then if they win, we'll give out some prizes and stuff.
I have an idea.
Oh yeah?
I like the charity. That's always good. I think you should do that. But then on top of it, for this one, since Steve isn't here, maybe we kind of sweeten the deal for Jake. Maybe say if the Bills have the highest graded offensive line, Steve has to get the Aaron Rodgers tattoo.
The Aaron Rodgers tattoo would be good.
I mean, I think he could sport it. I mean, I kind of want to sign him up for it since he's not here. But that's just the thought. Something.
Look at that. There we go. So one thing I want to make clear, this is a perfect one because we think this guy's crazy, so it's a great bet, right? We are all too happy to take that. There are other ones that we've had thrown in, and if you're sending us an idea for a bet, fire us an email to nflpodcast@pff.com. You can find us on Twitter as well, @PFF NFL Pod. Let us know what the bet is. If you're sending the email, put bet or wager in the subject line so Stone doesn't get upset trying to trawl through all of our emails and find them. And then we're going to open up this Google sheet that we have so people can kind of see and track them as the season goes. But there's one guy, for example, a guy called JT Villani, who says Jalen Waddle will have a higher PFF grade than Devontae Smith. Now, we're not going to take that bet because it's entirely plausible, right? Mm-hmm. It could go either way. Those guys both graded well. I think Devontae Smith has a good year this year because of A.J. Brown showing up, and it's prime for him to be better this season.
That seems like a pretty fair. That's even.
But that's the thing, right? It's like even money.
Yeah.
So we're not taking that bet, right? Mm-hmm. We only want bets where we
you guys
think
are getting the better deal.
Well, not even the better deal, but we are adamant about something, and the listeners think we're full of it. That's the point, right?
Okay.
If you think we're crazy because of what we've been saying, then hit us up with a bet that takes the opposite stance or is way apart from what we've been saying. The point about the Waddle versus Smith thing. It's I might think that Devontae Smith has a higher grade, but would it surprise me if it went the other way? No. So I'm not going to bet on it. I need, it needs to be a hard and fast thing. So we're definitely taking the one from Jake. I think we're ignoring or declining the one from JT. What's his name?
I kind of want to get in
JT
here. I want some bets. I want to play some bets.
I mean, you can.
My last one I publicly did with PFF didn't go so well.
No, you had to get dunked in. Was it butter?
Melted butter. Yeah, it was horrendous. I took a shower in the sink over there.
So what I never actually followed up on this, but that terrible idea, right? Yeah. Awful idea, and even. As somebody that's been doing the charity stuff and we've been doing forfeits and that kind of thing, we've done some pretty stupid things, right? I had to dress up as Jackson Mahomes and do a TikTok dance, right? Unpleasant, but it lasted 8 seconds, right? And then you're done. Plus the, perpetual shame of that being in existence on the internet and that kind of thing. But yeah, there you go. So, but once it's done, right? And you can get out of there and you don't have to do it again. The butter thing. So it's immediately unpleasant having a thing of butter dunked on you. But I would imagine the next 12 hours are worse.
Yep.
Because that's not coming out. That's not immediate. You're not washing that out immediately. It's that's a nightmare.
It's 7 showers, cleaning the floors. The worst mistake too, as being a college guy, I have to right after the national championship game. I did this right before kickoff.
Yeah.
I just got out of the sink shower. Right when they're kicking off, and I'm just I'm all greasy, I'm slimy, and I'm just literally the entire game. I think the first 3 quarters I watched on my phone in the shower because I just had to keep washing off. And then I wrote an article and then I went to bed and I was like, damn, I still smell like butter.
Were you making yourself hungry with the smell of butter?
I hate butter. That's the thing. I despise butter. I do not like butter at all whatsoever. So it was, I really thought I was going to win. What was the bet?
It was Alabama winning by something, right?
It was the spread with Eric. It was the spread of the Cincinnati-Alabama game, and he straight up told me, he was like, honestly, you were on the right side because I bet Cincinnati. They didn't cover.
Yeah.
Bama covered, and I got dunked in butter right here in this lovely studio.
That's just such a terrible idea of a thing to bet.
I'm not going to do it again.
No.
But, I say that, and if you get me up here in the right mood and I'm having a couple energy drinks in me, I might do it.
Right, yeah. Just terrible. Anyway, so you did that. Aaron Rodgers, we're not going to talk. So big news that we're kind of not going to cover, right? Baker Mayfield got traded to the Carolina Panthers. We have talked kind of ad nauseum about Baker Mayfield and that whole deal, and I don't think it's worth rehashing with you here as a different voice. You know what I mean? Right. We've hit it. We've hit it from every angle.
We're all on the same page.
Right. Everybody thinks, it's a cheap deal. The Baker Mayfield hate is getting out of control, blah, blah, blah. So that, and plus at this point, when this podcast is going out, it happened a while ago. So we're not going to hit that. Another thing that happened a few days ago, but I think is worth covering anyway, is Aaron Rodgers apparently got his first tattoo, as Tyler threw up on the screen there, showed.
I have no idea what it means, but I'm going to be honest with you. It's kind of kick-ass. I like it.
So it's kind of cool looking, but the memes about it, I think, are funny. And the first one I saw, who did this come? Was it Kyle Madsen, who tweeted something like, tattoo artist, what do you want to do today? Aaron Rodgers, have you ever heard Kyrie Irving talk? Artist, say no more, fam. That perfect, right? That kind of sums up that tattoo, in that it's almost certainly coming from somebody that, drinks a lot of
kombucha.
Yeah.
Kombucha club.
Yeah. Or matcha tea.
You know what kind of comes into my mind? This was the first thing I thought about, because I was writing something about college football, thought about the Lions, and I thought this was very interesting. It's like, what if you put college football mascots in there? Like, what if Quinn Ewers gets that, but it's Bevo on the other side? Or, like, you get Uga in there, you get, like, a Gamecock.
Yeah.
I think that could be a bet. If Texas wins the national title, someone's got to get that tattoo, but with Bevo in there.
I don't think you want a tattoo where it takes, like, 10 minutes to explain it to somebody, you know?
That's true.
Because that's like a conversation, right? Like, that every element of that is a thing, and there's a story, and there's, you know, there's a book that he read. Not a book. There's an article that he read from some debunked website. You know what I mean? Like, the whole thing is a narrative, right? It's going to take.
It's kind of scary, actually, when you say that.
You have any tattoos?
No. So here's my philosophy. I love tattoos, but if I'm going to get one, I'm going all or nothing. Like, I'm getting a sleeve.
Oh, it's for like a full.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not going to do it unless I ever get to the point where it's like, I'm just going to commit to, like, just getting jacked and then just looking scary. And then
So,
it's like, you might as well just get the full sleeve, man. But that's the only way I get one.
My parents don't like tattoos, so none of us had them for years. And then my brother, like, wanted a tattoo for years, wouldn't get one because, like, you know, his parents would see and he'd get in trouble. And then, like, did the same thing. Went from, like, nothing to had this, like, monster chest piece, right? This, like, takes up literally, like, the entirety of his front. And it looked a lot like the Aaron Rodgers thing, right? It's an insane looking thing. And I didn't tell our parents. But he would, like, you know, take Facebook photos or whatever, like throw a picture up on social media, and you'd, like, see it popping out of the top of his T-shirt. I'm like, you can't, if you want them to not know, you can't put that photo up. They're going to see that. Like, they're not
How'd
idiots.
they find out?
I mean, they saw one of those photos eventually. It was like, what the hell is that? He was like, oh, it's just this giant chest piece tattoo that I have. Don't worry about it. And then, you know, eventually they didn't, like, lose their mind or whatever, so now he has a bunch of tattoos. I was telling Tyler that I don't have any either, but it's not the same kind of thing. I like tattoos, but I haven't found anything that I like to the point where I think in 15 years I'll still like that.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, it's cool, but I don't know if I want it on me forever. Like, I'm pretty sure in 10, like, you think back 10 years to when you were, like, 3, you know? Mm-hmm. You don't like the same things, you know? You don't like Paw Patrol anymore or whatever it was you were into back in the day.
That's true.
Like,
I would have got Tommy Pickles from Rugrats probably.
yeah, like, same thing. I don't know, whatever I was thought was awesome 10 years ago is probably not what I think is awesome now. If I had a tattoo of it on me, I think that would annoy me.
Yeah, that's always a scary thought for me. Like, again, I love them, but I'm 23, and it's like, if I'm your age, it's like 53. Like, am I going to like this? I don't know. That's just a big investment beyond the price tag. But I love them. It's art. That one is interesting. I like it. I don't know if I like it anymore after talking about it. It's scary.
My main question was, do you think it contains enough, like, black magic incantations to make Green Bay win a Super Bowl this year?
Ooh. I think it helps the vibes, like Aaron Rodgers' aura. You know? I think there's something about it where he's clearly put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just like, I don't know.
Has he put too much thought into it? Like, you know, when he
Can we measure that? Like PFF tats? I don't know.
Tat to, like, you know, time in the playbook ratio.
I don't know. That's interesting. I kind of like Green Bay, though. I do, just in general.
Even though they have no receivers.
They drafted two. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. They
did, but Watson, I think, is a very limited skill set type of player for somebody that, because it's not like they just need a receiver, right?
Yeah.
They need to replace Devontae Adams. Like this is a bad receiving core. This was an average receiving core with Devontae Adams, who's been the best receiver in the NFL for the last couple of years. Now you take Devontae Adams off it, and it's like, oh no. I mean, so you need to replace one of the best receivers in the league.
I mean, that guy was the entire. What was that game last year? Was it Sunday Night Football when? Who was that against? But Devontae got hurt. He had I think he got a concussion. He came back in. And his target rate for the game, I think he had half the targets for the game. Yeah, he was the offense. I mean, he can't. What he can do is nobody else can do in the NFL, in my opinion. He's the best receiver in the NFL.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of there's an irreplaceable sense to that. Now, is there ways to work around that? The reason why I think I kind of like him is the defense. Because if you can get like that 1 year, you know, where it's like in a truly elite group, number one in the entire league, you have Aaron Rodgers. Maybe these rookies step up. I think there's a plausible way to think that they could possibly finally make it back.
But even so, you know, you look at there's a lot of receivers in recent years have hit the ground running as rookies, right, and been really good. So obviously Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, these guys are like dominant. They're 2 of the 5 best receivers in the NFL already after 2 years and 1 year respectively. I mean, that doesn't feel like it's even within Christian Watson's range of outcomes. Like he doesn't have the complete skill set that allows him to be that player. He's big, he's fast, he's good in a straight line, linear kind of athlete. The dude ran a really Spartan route tree in college in an offense that wasn't pass heavy, doesn't have good ball skills. Like there's a lot to not like for a quarterback who like relies on trust with receivers.
So I'm the only one in PFF headquarters that spoke for Christian Watson.
Okay.
People like you, everybody, hates on him.
I don't know. Just saying, there's a lot wrong with this guy as a prospect.
I agree. So this was the thing. So I am a sicko. I watch a lot of college football. I watch North Dakota State football with Eric Eager too. I like FCS, and I watched him early in the year. I knew of him. I wasn't too fond of him at the time. But then I went down to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and that guy opened up my eyes. I was like, who the heck is it? Like, what happened to the Christian Watson I knew? And then I started to kind of dig deeper into like the latter half of the season, and you started to see some growth there. You know, with his ball skills, he had some disgusting misses earlier.
Yeah.
But it got better because at Mobile, I was like, is this the same? I mean, it looked completely different, 180, and you could see the growth throughout the season. And even from a route running perspective, I thought his releases too, when he did get that opportunity, that I was really impressed with the growth. And that made me confident. It's like, well, if you get him, you know, at the NFL level, outside of this, you know, kind of gimmicky offense, the college offense that you just don't see at the NFL level, I think we could possibly see something. And, you know, again, it's kind of hard to evaluate someone that comes from that type of offense where, you know, a lot of the action he is getting, it's just kind of like scheme touches. But I think that also gives him a pretty high floor right away just because of his athletic ability and just the need to, like, find people to make plays in that offense so they can give him some scheme touches. I think this guy had an unprecedented combine. I think it was probably the best combine of the last few years.
I mean, so I agree that I think his potential is quite high. My thing is more like I just don't see year one him having success because the biggest hurdle I think he has is developing any kind of trust with Aaron Rodgers. Like that's been one of the biggest issues with when you take away Rodgers' number one receiver, things don't generally go well. And part of that is because he doesn't trust anybody else. Like when you look at how much of Devontae Adams' success is Rodgers looking up at the line, seeing one-on-one coverage, and it's just an auto target, right? The ball is going that way, and oftentimes it's going that way on a back shoulder, and the synchronicity between the two of them is perfect, so it's a catch. The only other guy he's had in recent years where he even trusts him the same or a similar way is Lazard, who just isn't that good. Right. But like Lazard gets those targets as well, where if he looks up one-on-one coverage, boom, Lazard will get a target. I don't see him developing that with Christian Watson in a few weeks. So you got Watson, probably not going to get that. You've got Sammy Watkins. Like the last time Sammy Watkins was like intact, you know, and healthy years.
The solar being.
Yeah, like it's
the reptile solar being.
That's just not happening either, right? Like you go through the list. Lazard, we already talked about, just isn't that good. Randall Cobb doesn't have that in his range of outcomes. Like Romeo Doubs to me is actually the guy who, interestingly, could steal a march on everybody. And like I think Lazard starts the season as their number one receiver almost by default, right? He's got the leg up, he's got the advantage, he's the only guy Rodgers trusts. But at some point, you're going to stop feeding him 20 targets a game because he's going to get like 45 yards out of that. So you're going to start looking for other people. And I could see Doubs being the guy he turns to.
I bet Doubs is better than – I don't want to say better. I bet he's more productive than NVS was for him.
I could see
as a
that.
rookie.
I mean, I could see – I think Watson might actually be the kind of the MVS role in that offense, like almost the designated deep threat of the dude who just goes like just run a straight line downfield, and if I need it, I'll throw the ball your way.
I mean, Doubs is also good. I mean, Doubs I think actually tied for the most deep receiving touchdowns.
Right, but he's got like even in terms of like what he was doing in college, ran a much more nuanced, complete route tree. Right. Whereas like if developing Christian Watson is a process. Like you can send him out there like right now and just say, you know, just give him the Valdez-Scantling role and say, go deep. If I need to heave the ball in your direction, look out for it. But like, you know, that's your role here.
So going back to what I said at the beginning. So what kind of sparked this is I was just kind of perusing the betting odds. And I noticed, which kind of surprised me, Green Bay had the number 2 odds just ahead of the Rams, defending Super Bowl champions, to win the NFC. It was Tampa, Green Bay, and then Los Angeles. And that kind of sparked some things in my head. It's like, well, they lost the best receiver in the NFL. They had the second most efficient offense in the NFL last year. I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back, but you look at that defense, there's a lot to like on that defense.
Yeah.
And again, we've seen these teams that do have that true number 1 elite defense. They don't even have an offense sometimes, but they just get by with that defense. I think this group kind of has, they have the full recipe, all the ingredients to kind of be that special group that kind of helps out the offense. Now, I still think this offense will probably have to be like a 75th percentile or better finish in terms of like just offensive efficiency on a per play basis throughout the season to really get to the big game, even if you have an elite defense, just with the way the NFL is right now. But I think the offense can still do that. So that's why I'm kind of like Green Bay. They're in a weak division. I don't know. They're interesting to me. Aaron Rodgers is an interesting dude. We all know that. But I think the team in general could be one of the best. And I think, getting back a healthy Jair Alexander, that was last year that cornerback group really stepped up. Eric Stokes, he shocked me. I did not think he would be even producing at that level like years down the road in his NFL career, and he was still very good. Russell Douglas, everybody knows, that was a surprise. Picked him up off her practice squad, become a big player. I'm curious to see how he's going to do in the slot this year. But getting back a healthy Jair Alexander, so if you go to PFF.com, look at our cornerback rankings, our outside cornerback rankings. There's an interesting heat map in there from the 2020 Green Bay Packers, and you can see just how much Jair Alexander just shut down his side of the field. It was, you don't really typically see that at the NFL level, cornerback doing that. It was, no team was going that way because they knew who was over there. So, I think if you can get that core healthy, they, like I said, they have the fixings to be one of those special groups, and that's why I kind of like them. I was surprised at first to see they're second to win the NFC ahead of the Rams, but I'm kind of buying them now.
Yikes! I just think that wide receiver group might be too bad for them to win
Really?
the Super Bowl.
So what would your order be in the NFC? Power rank. You power rank the NFC.
Tampa Bay was definitely first in the NFC.
Yep.
Where are my power rankings? Let's pull them up so I can remember what.
Somebody actually asked me that. Who I think I'm going to win the Super Bowl. I can't pick against Tom Brady in the Bucs.
Well, you can it's always, that's your starting point, right?
Yeah.
Like Tom Brady, one last go, 45. What the hell?
This is what they were making, right? Everyone's going to be like, "Oh, the NFL's fixed. Tom Brady wins another one." But it's like, no, he's the best.
I had Tampa Bay number 1 in the NFC. The Rams were number 2. Where's my next? Green Bay number 3. San Francisco number 4, and all the way down at 12 overall, but 5 in the NFC is Dallas. Dallas and Philadelphia are right next to each other.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about San Francisco?
Sure, but let's finish the Green Bay thing first. I just think so that wide receiver group to me just looks too bad. Like I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with a group that's that bad on paper, unless obviously somebody steps up and does something completely different than it looks likely. Watson maybe dominates as a rookie. Sammy Watkins turns back the clock. Whatever it is, unless one of those guys shows something way different than it seems likely. The last time Rodgers had a group this bad was 2015 when Jordy Nelson went down the preseason and all of a sudden there's nobody left, right? And that was the worst PFF grade of Rodgers' career. And it was 15 points worse than either season, either side of it. So even he's back-to-back MVPs right now. That doesn't mean anything. He was a 90 grade the year before. No Jordy Nelson, 74 or whatever it was, and then 90 the next year when he's back. So I think the wide receiver group's too bad. The other thing with the defense, I think you're right. That defense has the ability to maybe go on that kind of run where it looks like one of those all-time great ones. But most of those all-time great defenses did not play in the NFL that looks like we're about to get this year, where there's so many just absurd-looking offenses. Put the 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense in today's NFL. How many does the Chiefs go out there and just shred them? Can they deal with Josh Allen on a good day? I don't know if the Broncos, whatever that was, 2015, the Seahawks. I don't know if those great defenses. I mean, they're going to be great, but I don't know if it makes the same kind of difference that it did in a year where, like, there weren't that many good teams.
So they're extinct. They're like dinosaurs. They're just never going to come back. Like,
no, maybe not extinct, but,
Maybe.
like, I just think we are talking about a different NFL than usual, and the impact of, like, a really good defense this year might not be what it usually is.
That's a fair take. But I also look at the NFC North, and it's bad. I know, like, the Restore the Roar a lot in the football community, spearheaded by our own Eric Eager. Love the Detroit Lions. I personally think they're probably going to be kind of bad again. Shocking, I know. The Bears, I mean, don't need to elaborate on that. The Vikings, we'll see. I mean, maybe Kevin O'Connell, like, sparks something there. But odds are Kirk's going to be Kirk, and they're going to be a middling team once again. So, I don't know. They have, like, this. I think they have the favorable division to kind of help them get there.
I mean, I think they're a likely playoff team. I just think,
likely playoff team,
which they have been for years, right?
Yeah.
But the whole point with Green Bay and with Rodgers getting up in years is like, are we in a position to win that next ring? And I don't think that's likely given what we're looking at.
I don't think they're going to win a ring.
Yeah,
I would be shocked if they won, but I wouldn't be shocked if they got there.
Right.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. I mean, in my power ranking, we tiered them as well, right? And I had the first group of teams was like true contenders, like legitimate Super Bowl sort of favorites, guys that you would expect to be challenging for that. And the next tier down is like, I mean, it could be their year. Like, they could win one. And Green Bay is at the top of that tier. I don't think that they're in that tier with Buffalo and Tampa Bay and the Rams of, like, you expect those teams to be there at the real, like, in the championship games. I think Green Bay feels like a step behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, the last team that kind of had a run like that. I think they could possibly have, like, a San Francisco in 2019 where the offense was good. Like, Jimmy G obviously wasn't great, but, like, the offense was efficient enough to the point where, like, it wasn't an issue. It was a good group. But the defense really carried them to getting to the Super Bowl. I think this kind of team has that type of recipe. It's kind of where
I think that's true. I just think that the league is different now than it was then.
2019?
Yeah. I mean, look at it. Just look at what happened this offseason. Like, this offseason alone, the amount of, like, concentration of talent from, like, not great teams to great teams, they all went in one direction. Like, the amount of teams that really loaded up and tried to get better this year. I think we just sort of split the league into, like, these contending teams and teams that are going to be pretty bad.
And a lot of those contending teams are in the AFC.
Right.
Outside of the Packers way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing in their favor is that they're in the easier conference, right? And, okay, they've still got Tampa Bay and the Rams, but, like, it's a hell of a lot better than it is in the AFC where a team like Miami that went on that crazy, arms race run still might not make the playoffs. All right, we want to talk about San Francisco, but first we want to talk about the best place to play fantasy football this summer, Underdog Fantasy. Their Best Ball Mania tournament has $10 million in total prize money. And the best part is you just draft your fantasy football team, and that's it. No waivers, no trades, no in-season management, none of that stuff that I forget about after, a week, and therefore my team stinks. You just draft. Underdog gives you your best score each week of the season, and the highest score at the end of the year wins. The champion of Best Ball Mania last year drafted in June. We're in July already, so there's no time like the present to join Underdog and take your shot at $1 million draft. Plus, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code PFF. So that helps out everybody. Also, if you play 10 of those dollars using promo code PFF, you get a free PFF subscription. So what are you waiting for? Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com or the App Store. Play $10 with the code PFF and draft your Best Ball Mania team today. Outstanding deal. All right, 49ers, who might be stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo now that the Baker Mayfield trade has gone down, and that leaves like the only team needing a quarterback, Seattle, in the division. So they're not trading him there.
Yeah. So
I don't think.
I think Jimmy G is going to get the axe.
They'll cut him?
I think they're going to cut him. And bearing, so here's the thing. I think right now where San Francisco is, and where really the entire league is, because like there's no market for him. Nobody's like going out of their way to be like, I need this guy on my team.
Do you think Seattle are interested in him, but no, there's no chance of him being traded? Like, if you're,
right.
are Seattle actually intrigued? Like, if he gets cut tomorrow, is he signing with Seattle the next day?
I think so. I think
that's true,
a plausible thing.
If that's true and you're the 49ers, should you not trade him to the Seahawks?
I think they won't. I don't think that's.
But do you think they
possible.
should? I agree that I don't think it's happening.
Yeah.
But this, I got this crap with the Baker Mayfield thing as well. It wasn't going to happen. But I honestly think the best thing for both Baker Mayfield and the Browns was for him to stay in Cleveland for the year if Watson's going to get suspended all season and just live through the spite and play well, and it works out for him, it works out for the Browns. For the 49ers, I agree, are not going to trade Jimmy G to the Seahawks.
I think that's.
But
more,
should they?
I think that's more about Seattle's probably not offering because they know.
Because they know they won't.
And I think things could change. So if for some reason, hopefully this doesn't happen, you never want to root for this to happen. But if some team starter goes down with an injury in the training camp or something, right, in the preseason, their starter goes down, they're hurt. Now they need a new quarterback. Then I think that's when you see the Jimmy G market start to heat up. And maybe Seattle's like, okay, well, if we want to kind of make a move here, then we need to up an offer or something. But then San Francisco is going to say, kick rocks. We're going to go take this other team, send them out of the division. But more than likely,
the problem is there's nobody. They're not going to be able to. The issue they have is that they don't want to trade him to a division rival. But the thing that's most likely to happen if they cut him is he's going to go to that division rival anyway. So you might as well get something out of it.
Yeah, but they're not going to want to give him anything. That's the thing.
Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle's not going to – just knowing how they operate, I think they're pretty comfortable with Geno and Drew Lock, which, power to them. I don't stop believing. But let's be real, they're really not that good.
But there's always value in getting it, knowing that you don't have to go through a competition of, maybe somebody gives them an enticing – like New Orleans, right? Maybe not New Orleans, but somebody gives them a job that okay, you're not starting, but there's a big chance that next year you could be in with the gig, or you know what I mean? Somebody throws enough money at him as a backup that it's an intriguing place for him to go. It's not nailed on that he goes to Seattle. Whereas if they trade for him, even if it's a low round pick, it's done. You've got him.
That's fair. I mean, it's an interesting situation. I still think, if I had to place a wager on what I think is going to happen, I think they're going to go up to the wire because they can save some money if they cut him before the start of the season.
Yeah,
but if
week one is
as soon as week one hits, that changes. So I think they're going to wait till the last second, wait to see if anything pops up. If an injury occurs, then they're going to be chomping at the bit, calling him hey, you want him? And they're probably like, yeah, we want Jimmy G. But I think more than likely he's probably going to get the axe right before the start of week one, and then maybe we'll see what happens. That's when it gets interesting because what team's going to want to take on a quarterback right before the start of the season?
Yeah.
And it's not Jimmy G's not the next great thing.
So I tell a lie. That's the other advantage for the 49ers dragging this out to the wire is that they play Seattle in week 2. And if he's signing with Seattle anyway, if you only give him 2 weeks to learn the playbook, that's better than if you had training camp and preseason and 2 weeks to learn the playbook. So
right.
It does benefit San Francisco a little bit for one game if they drag this out that long. But to me, okay, generally speaking, you don't want to trade a player within the division because you don't want to make your division rivals better. But I would say to the 49ers that you stick with your own evaluation. You had a quarterback that took you essentially a couple of plays away from a Super Bowl, and you decided that despite having that guy locked up under contract for a while, that you were going to trade 3 first-round draft picks to go get his replacement. You didn't need to do any of that, right? So you obviously thought that whether it's play quality or injury history, the chance of him actually playing over an extended period of time, you went out there and said, not only do we want to think about moving on from this guy, we are going to move heaven and earth to get the next guy in right now. If you think that little of Jimmy G, the last year shouldn't have changed anything, right? It's not like he went out there and balled out to the point where you're like, oh, we got this wrong. So still stick with that opinion that if he goes to play with Seattle, okay, he's probably not going to last the whole season. He's Jimmy G. He'll get hurt. And even if he does, that roster stinks. He's not going to be that good. We shouldn't fear this. We should not be scared of Jimmy G coming back to haunt us twice a year. We should stick with our evaluation of him.
Yeah, that's where you see some of those reports kind of floating around. It's well, Jimmy G might stay with the team. He could, maybe he's starting for a little bit. And it's now this is Trey Lance's team. And I would be shocked if he's on the roster week 1. Given the finances. And just given too, you don't want that overhanging because that's just going to be the topic with the 49ers. It doesn't matter what they do in week 1 or week 2. And if Trey Lance struggles out the gate, there's a high probability he does. you don't want that. Like, oh, is Jimmy going to start? Is he going to take over for Lance type of thing? So, I mean, he's going to be off the team, I think, by week 1. It's just a very interesting dynamic that they have kind of brewing there. And, I mean, going back to their initial investment, just I'm still kind of shocked that they did that for Trey Lance, who, I mean, I've always been on record with thinking he was the 5th best quarterback out of that draft class.
Right.
When people said, kind of were like, oh my God, they're going to take Mac Jones, and they're freaking out. Like, they're going to make the biggest mistake ever. I was like, I kind of like Mac Jones. I think this would be a good fit for him. And I honestly wish we would have got that pairing, because I think that would have been a really good team. But, you know, I'm curious to see how this is going to end up. I think ultimately this entire situation, regardless of what happens with Jimmy G, if they get any draft capital from him or not, I think it's going to come back to kind of haunt them. And I think, you know, hopefully they prove me wrong, but I'm not very confident in that team. And that's why I said I want to talk about the 49ers, because, you know, you said you had them, 4th in the NFC?
Yeah.
Which I think, I mean, like, I'm not going to say, like, that's ridiculous. I'm more bearish on the 49ers in general. I think the defense could have some issues. I would be concerned about cornerback specifically. And then, again, that offense, we'll see what Trey Lance does, but I think he's going to have some issues this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says very bad things about Trey Lance if Jimmy G is still on the roster, you know, in the regular season. Like, aside from anything else, not even – it's obviously bad in terms of how you said it, where you don't want that guy hanging over his shoulder for the whole way. But, like, if he's still there, I think it just says that the 49ers don't think that highly of Trey Lance yet, or at least think a lot less of him than they did when they traded 3 first-round picks for him. And having, you know, they're the ones that have seen him up close and personal for a year. That's just not good for him, I think. I mean, yeah, the 49ers roster, I think, is generally – it's worse than some other rosters around there, but they make up for it in coaching. And, like, the cornerback situation won't be worse than it was a year ago, and they were a good team, you know, playoff caliber team then. So I think they'll be in pretty good shape. So we got a few emails in that I want to hit on. Let me see. With the first one, we had a guy who emailed in and wanted to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson and the move that the Giants made in the draft, which was a diehard. Yeah, which was a pick that was generally not received well, right? Yeah. It's like day 1 for the Giants, great. Came away with a couple of stars, perfect. Day 2 and beyond, things went off the rails. And that started with the Wan'Dale Robinson pick, which a lot of people thought was a reach. So this guy, what's his name? Peter Kratzel. Hey, Sam and Steve, and Treash. Enjoy your podcast very much and try not to miss a show, even when we're doing 3 a week. Had a question about Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm a Giants fan. Everything I've read about him says that the Giants reached, including your own analysis. And some say reached badly. But I have a point I need some clarification on. I've read multiple places that his career grade in college was 91 plus, which placed him 3rd among all wide receivers in the draft. I saw an earlier report that he can no longer find saying the grade was even higher than that, which would have been the highest of any wide receiver in the draft. With such good grades, why are you guys so down on him succeeding in the NFL just because he has T-Rex arms, thanks Sam, and isn't very tall? And while I maybe have your attention, he wanted to ask me if I follow real, quote-unquote, football in Dublin and beyond. If I agree that the Old Firm Derby is the greatest and most intense rivalry in all of sport, you won't insult me by asking which side of the Old Firm I support. Okay.
You lost me at the end there.
Soccer. So the Old Firm Derby is Celtic and Rangers, the Scottish, largely sectarian rivalry between 2 Glasgow clubs. I don't agree that that's the greatest and most intense rivalry in all of sport, largely because it's Scottish football and therefore simply cannot be large enough to be the most intense and
sound
greatest.
Like fighting words.
A little bit. I do follow football, Liverpool fan, Ireland fan, sadly, we suck, etc. Good year for Liverpool. We're on track for an unprecedented quadruple, winning 4 different competitions. Fell at the final hurdle in 2 of them and end up with a season that's like, yeah, I mean, it's good. It's not, not what it could have been. So anyway, the Wan'Dale thing. I think the 2 numbers he's talking about are the difference between overall PFF grade and PFF receiving grade, but they're both above 90, whatever. The point being, the guy has really good grades. Why does everyone hate that pick?
So it's kind of like, how did he get that grade? And that's where, like, I'm always, especially in college football, because, with some of those offenses, it can be easy to get propped up and kind of have your hand held with your job. And with Wan'Dale's case, I mean, started out at Nebraska where he was a hybrid player. Like, he was a running back essentially for some games, and he would split between being a running back in the backfield or out in the slot. But he was a gadget player. Like, he wasn't doing a lot to get the ball in his hands. He was just kind of outdoing lesser athletes on the defense after the catch. And that's where it also gets into, like, if we want to get deeper about it, like why running backs matter at the collegiate level and why running the ball can be highly effective for your team. It's just because if you have a difference maker at running back against lesser athletes, I mean, you're going to win, right? You can have efficient run plays. But with Wan'Dale's case, I mean, it was just a lot of schemed production that he took advantage of against lesser competition, in my opinion. Then he went to Kentucky, of course. He did a good job there, had a high PFF grade. He wanted to move from Nebraska to Kentucky to play in a pro-style offense for Liam Cohn, the offense coordinator there at the time. And, you know, I think he did succeed in that. But, again, it was still a lot of schemed production. And I think when you're going up the NFL level, I think the size is going to be an issue, even in the slot. I think that's going to be a big issue there. So for me, like, I've always been a big Wan'Dale fan, but in college football. And the NFL, from a prospect perspective, I was absolutely shocked that he was a top 50 pick. And for me, looking at what was going on at the time, it almost makes me think that they panicked into that because of everything going on with Kadarius Toney. And they're kind of concerned that they didn't have that gimmicky weapon, that they could just get the ball in the hands and maybe he can go out there and make a play. So that's where I'm at. I just think with what he did in college, he can't do at the NFL level.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is, so you talked about it there, like, athletes can thrive at the college level in a way you can't in the NFL, right? Because I forget who was I listening to talk about this? It might have been Greg Olson, or I might be attributing this to him when it was somebody else. But they were talking about the difference between the college level and the NFL level is, you know, in college, there's a lot of guys playing that aren't great athletes, right? No matter who you're playing. You can play a great college team.
Even in the SEC.
Right. And, okay, outside of Georgia last year, like, 3 or 4 guys are getting drafted. 3 or 4 guys are going to be good NFL players. Everybody else, this is their last game, right? They're working a different job 2 years' time. This is not where they're going. And they're not as good an athlete, right? So if you're a high-level athlete, you can beat up on bad players in pretty much every game you're going up against. You can find the mismatch. In the NFL, everybody's a good athlete. Like, there's almost nobody playing on Sundays that isn't a stupidly high-level athlete. And if they are, they make up for it with something else. You know what I mean? Like, they make up for it with being smarter or ahead of you mentally and all those kinds of things. So you can have guys that dominate in college simply by being better athletes. It's like a sort of souped up version of high school where you can be the best high school player ever literally just by doing that. Like, I'm just a better athlete than you. I'm going to rack up 3,000 yards this year and you can't stop it. In the NFL, that doesn't work. So you're immediately looking, well, what are the transferable traits? Like, is he just surviving by being an athlete, or can this work in a real offense? So I think a big part of the Wan'Dale thing is that schemed up plays. It's surviving on being a weird athlete that's better than a lot of other people, and it doesn't immediately lend itself to, like, okay, this is the role in the NFL. And the second part of that is the NFL, I think, is very bad at scheming production up for people, partly because of the stuff we just talked about, that, like, everybody is a freak athlete. You can't just, like, fire in the ball in a bubble screen and expect them to run through the entire defense because they're all good. But it means that you get these guys in college that are like gimmick players or have a gimmick role within an offense, and that role just isn't there in the NFL. That's why, like, Tavon Austin isn't good at the NFL level, because the things that he was great at in college, they're not a big thing in the NFL. Like, you can't just give him a million jet sweeps. Like, they're not going to work, right? You might get one of them that he breaks off every now and again, but you can't run enough of those to the point where an NFL defense doesn't understand what you're doing and clamp down on it, and there's nowhere for him to go. And if he can't, like, run real routes and thrive on the outside, or even as a, like, true slot receiver, he's just not going to be good. So I think that's the concern with Wan'Dale, is, like, he was that type of player in college, and given his size and the way that the NFL works, it's like, does that work at the next level? There's not a huge amount of history of it.
Yeah, and, like, I'm sure, like, some people listening right now are thinking, like, well, what about Deebo Samuel, right? Everybody knows him as this gimmicky guy. It's like, no, he's like an outside receiver. He's like the third most productive wide receiver on the outside last year. Runs like 60% of his routes from that alignment. He wins as a wide receiver too,
and then as a running back.
Yeah.
Like he's basically he's a hybrid player because he's doing two conventional things at the same time, which is kind of the same as Cordero Patterson as well. Like he became great last year as a real running back who just happened to be able to win with some wide receiver stuff as well. They're not like manufacturing freak touches for them. It's not like Debo or Patterson only became good when you gave them like wildcat touches, and you had to invent like a weird package for them.
Yeah, so like he's the prime case of why like every data point is not equal at all levels of football. And it's not even like NFL compared to college. Like I think it even boils down to even more in the collegiate level, where we know the FBS is like 131 FBS schools, but those need to be divided up because the difference in Group of 5 and Power 5,
right?
Even that, like we talked about the difference in the Power 5, like even in the SEC against the NFL, it's pretty drastic. But the Group of 5 to the Power 5, even some of those data points from those guys, at those two different levels of football, they're vastly different because you're not finding the athletes that are at the Power 5 in the Group of 5 at all, unless they transferred out from the Power 5 down for some reason. And so that's why, for me, it's interesting. I mean, I've done a little bit looking into it. Why, like, even like we talked like the pass rush versus coverage thing. Like, it's different at the Power 5 level. Like, They're pretty equal. It's because why? You have Aiden Hutchinson's, you have Kayvon Thibodeau's, who are just monsters on the edge.
It's so much more about what the athlete is.
Yeah, and like athleticism just matters, and it's like everybody was like, well, Kayvon's not necessarily polished, and I'll agree. Like last year he wasn't. I think he made some strides, but like he still had like a 91 pass rush grade. That's because he's a freak, and he's just piecing a little bit together, and that's where he can make that jump, and you can be an absolute game wrecker at the collegiate level if you're a freak like that. So that's why it's interesting, and you have to kind of look at, I always say, like PFF grade, it's a leading indicator. Why is he earning this high PFF grade? And really look into why he is. In Wandale's case, again, just a great college player. Hopefully he proves me wrong, but I just don't think that's going to sustain at the NFL level.
The other concerning part is, like, you do have Kadarius Toney already there, right? And people were sort of saying at the time, oh, they're going to trade him away. This is him gone. And even if it is, it means you're spending a pretty high premium pick to replace a guy that you drafted in the first round a year ago who hasn't, like, it's just bad process, like top to bottom. So even if that was your justification, like, oh, well, we're going to get rid of this guy because he's an asshole and we screwed up last pick, it's just like, that doesn't feel like great process.
And with Kadarius too, like, I know, like, the big knock on him was easily, like, he's not a polished route runner. Right. He's just very raw. But I think we've seen enough growth. It's like the Christian Watson thing I was talking about. Like we saw some growth there where we're confident he can be more than just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Schemed up guy
in the NFL and in college. Yeah. His tape was exactly what you described with Watson, where like you could see from the start to the end, it's a different player. Yeah. Like his development over the year, even if you're just watching his targets, like you could see him get better at running routes as that season went on, which I think is massively encouraging to like what he can be going forward. All right, gentlemen, all men strive for gold in their life. Gold medals, gold watches, gold everything. However, there's a certain type of man who goes the extra mile, Treash. He walks with the confidence of an eagle, and he giggles in the face of danger. He's a big, hairless, winning machine. And when he unzips his pants, he sees platinum.
I was wondering where you're going with this.
That's it. That's right. Manscaped would like to introduce you to their best and biggest ultimate hygiene bundle yet, the Platinum Package 4.0. Manscaped is a leader in below-the-waist grooming. Now trust them with the whole shebang. Join 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off with free shipping with the promo code PFF. Manscaped's brand new Platinum Package 4.0 is the biggest bundle they've ever offered, giving you a bulk discount on Manscaped's top products. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use PFF. It's time that you enjoy the finer things in life and get yourself a Platinum Package for your Platinum Package.
I'm not going to lie. I love the ball deodorant.
Yeah? Big ball deodorant guy?
I'm a big ball deodorant guy. I was very cautious. I opened up the package and I was like, am I going to use this? And then I was like, this is actually pretty good. They're onto something here.
I mean, look, what's the harm? Yeah. It's going to smell better than it did before, and that can't be a bad thing.
Exactly. And it smells awesome. So everybody, try out the ball deodorant. I will, 10 out of 10. I'll give them a review on that one.
There you go. Anthony Treash endorsed ball deodorant. That's what we're talking about here. All right, what else we got in the old email bag? We got a lengthy email from, who's this from? From somebody whose name I've left off the email. I'll find that in a second. But he was essentially talking about the comments we've made before about Miami's offense when breaking down their roster. And my point with Steve has essentially been, look, on paper, the combination of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle looks amazing, right? Two of the most exciting playmakers in the NFL. Tyreek Hill and like the closest Tyreek Hill analog the league has in the same offense. But given Mike McDaniel's offense, 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, given the sort of history they've had and just the way NFL offenses work, I don't know if you can put those two together and get like the sum of both players at the same time. I think you lose something because only one guy can kind of dominate at the same time. You don't get it's not a force multiplier the way it is when you add like an elite wide receiver to an average group. They make everybody better because they take all the attention away. I think you kind of lose something by having both of them in the offense at the same time, pending being proved otherwise, right, by this year. So this guy essentially said, not only do I think that Miami will not have the problem of getting both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle the ball, but I also think those two together have the potential to be an explosive cheat code and bring about a new version of the Shanahan system that may be even harder to stop. Reasons for thinking this way are as follows. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle have skill sets that I think will be uniquely hard for defensive coordinators to scheme against. They might legitimately be the fastest receiver tandem in NFL history. Hill draws a lot of attention in coverage because of his ability to create a touchdown from just a little bit of space, and Jalen Waddle is the closest thing to him in the league. I think the attention that they need to receive on every single play will make stopping both of them together extremely difficult. In other words, they will act as force multipliers. Hill and Waddle's skill sets are better equipped to attack all areas of the field. On any given play, either of them could run by the defense or a big game, or just the threat of this alone should open up the underneath opportunities for whichever one isn't running deep. This is different than Shanahan's 49ers offense because both of his stars, Debo and Kittle, are best equipped to attack the short and intermediate areas of the field, neither being a big threat to hurt the defense deep downfield. This means that Debo and Kittle are forced to share targets in the same area of the field, whereas Hill and Waddle can both take targets from anywhere. For example, in Miami's offense, Jalen Waddle could take the Debo role, while Tyreek Hill would be a supercharged version of the deep threat that Emmanuel Sanders played during their Super Bowl year. And then lastly, wide zone offense has been able to support multiple star pass catchers before, the Rams and Bengals last year, as well as the Vikings when they had Thielen and Diggs. To wrap it up, I'd love to hear if this makes Sam rethink any of his takes on Miami's offense, as well as your thoughts on Tyreek Hill and Waddle being the most unguardable duo in the league. What do you think?
I agree with some of that. I think with what they have there. So hang on, let me start with Tyreek Hill, because last year he wasn't like what everybody thinks Tyreek Hill is. I mean, everybody knew him as a deep threat, one of the, take the top off the defense. I mean, he could, rack up those deep receiving yards. I mean, he actually leads the league in deep receiving yards, touchdowns, and catches since 2017, still does. But last year, he wasn't a deep threat. He was a possession receiver, right? I mean, I think that's where kind of he was a little bit disgruntled. And I think we even got some, I don't know exactly, I think it was from his agent, about why like he didn't get used the way he should have, but Tyreek Hill still thrived in the role. I think if Tyreek Hill was a normal-sized NFL wide receiver, we'd be talking about him being like one of the best all-around receivers in the game. He just doesn't have the size factor. But yeah, he can do it all. So I think with what he can do is a little bit more than what Jalen Waddle can do, because right now, as far as I think Jalen Waddle could possibly be that all-around polished player, but I think right now, given what we saw last year, I think he's just more of that kind of that schemed guy that he takes those underneath touches, but also can, blow deep, but they didn't utilize him deep last year.
That email, by the way, was from Ben Yetzko. I found his name.
I think it was a good email. I think with what they can do, it's hard telling what their plan is. I think they're going to do it's going to be a lot of trickery. I mean, I think we all can assume that just with what they have there and those two playmakers, but I think we're going to see Tyreek Hill kind of take on more of that do-it-all type of role, and then Jalen Waddle's going to get utilized deep a little bit more. And I guess it kind of goes back to the quarterback position. Can Tua fully take advantage of what he has at his disposal?
To me, the most compelling point that he made is the idea that they can both work all areas of the field in a way that Kittle and Debo, for example, couldn't necessarily. So I think that actually is a fair point that, hey, look, we've seen already with Tyreek Hill that he can be, the designated deep threat, that he can be the high volume guy, the possession guy. He can do everything. I think Waddle has that as well, even if they haven't tapped into it yet. I think he can be that guy. And even if he can't, he's already shown that he can dominate the underneath stuff. So you only need Tyreek Hill to be able to be the deep threat, which he is, right? So I think it's fair to say that they can share targets in a way that Kittle and Debo couldn't necessarily do in San Francisco in what might ostensibly be the same offense. The point that they're both incredible players and it's just difficult to allocate that kind of coverage to two guys at the same time, I don't think really works because, we've seen teams do that to other teams. Like the Giants did it. The Giants don't have a good defense. They did it to take away Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, right? They literally essentially bracket covered both guys on every play and just said, go anywhere else with the ball, right? It's not going to these two guys. We are going to double team them, and everyone else is essentially in one-on-one coverage with no safety help. Find somebody else. And the Chiefs weren't really able to do that. So I think you can definitely take both guys away at the same time. That's not the reason I think it'll work. But I do think that's a reasonable point that they can both work all areas of the field, which might be enough to get like the sum of their parts working.
Right. And, I think that it goes back again to the larger question, can Tua take advantage of it?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, if you go back to that San Francisco team and it's like, well, if Kittle and Debo hypothetically could do the stuff that like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill could do, could they have done that? Because did they have the quarterback to do that? That was kind of the big knock there. And I think that just kind of, that's the big question still in Miami is can Tua fully take advantage of it? And I think the slander has gone a little bit too far. I'm not a part of Tua-non, but I think it's gone a little too far. But again, it's just like, I don't know. Nobody knows if he can be that elite talent that can fully take advantage consistently of those downfield weapons. Maybe they can make something work. But I think that is always going to be, that could end up being like the big limitation as to why, they're a good team, but they're not a great team or a contending team.
To me, any analysis of Tua has to begin with the starting point of his situation has been so bad that it's basically impossible to tell what he is, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's difficult to overstate just how bad that offensive line was last year, right? Cincinnati last year had a terrible offensive line, agreed? Cincinnati's offensive line gave up less pressures than Miami if you include their Super Bowl run, right? If you give them the extra games all the way through to the Super Bowl, they still allowed like 7 or 8 less pressures than Miami did all season long, despite them running a ton of RPOs and Tua getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. Like, they were actually protecting the offensive line and still gave up more pressure than the Bengals, who had a bad offensive line, going all the way to the Super Bowl. Like, it was historically terrible. So, and we know that there is like a line beyond which, if you're getting that volume of pressure, you're basically have no shot of functioning as a quarterback. Tua was over that line, right? So whatever you think of Tua and what he can be at the next level, you have to begin with the idea of we haven't really seen a fair version of him yet. This year should be. Like, this year should actually be a functional, reasonable analysis of Tua. But like, wherever you are right now, if your evaluation is not starting with like, we really haven't seen, it's wrong. Like, you can't just come out and say the guy stinks because he's got a noodle for an arm. I'm out. Or he's made too many mistakes. Like, yeah, but he was getting buried under pressure. Like, of course he made mistakes.
Their upgrade at left tackle might be the biggest upgrade in NFL history year over year at left tackle.
Yeah, I mean certainly one of them.
Like, that left tackle spot in Miami over the last few years has been the worst in the NFL by a country mile. And now they just got, I think, probably the most technically sound tackle in the NFL with Teron Armstead. Now, can Teron stay healthy?
Right.
That's the big question there. And if he can, that's obviously going to help Tua out a ton. So, I
mean, even if he can't, you're like, it's kind of like, remember the last years of Jason Peters, where you sort of like, I mean, if we budget in 2 or 3 games where he's not going to play, right? It's still better than like putting some schlub out there for 16 games.
I mean, Jason Peters,
17 games.
Jason Peters last year was like good.
Right. But so for Miami, right? Even if Teron Armstead misses 3 games, right, which would probably be about average for what he's missing these days, it's still a massive upgrade. Now you have 3 games where you're having a terrible left tackle.
Yeah. So I mean, going full circle up to the top, I would be surprised if we see a scenario where like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle cannot coexist. I don't think that they won't function together. I'm just saying that, like, I think
I think the sum of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill is probably less than the sum of the two on paper. Does that make sense? Like how they work as a combination is probably worse than if you had them sort of both individually in the same offense and added that up. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't care if you agree yet. Just am I articulating enough what I mean?
Kind of.
That I think,
see what you mean.
You know, that idea of like it's greater than the sum of their parts. You hear that a lot.
Yeah.
I think they're worse than the sum of their parts.
It's an interesting idea. I don't know. You're fascinating me. We're getting deep.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just think that because of the way I don't know that offense has demonstrated the ability necessarily to maximize two players like that in a way that they both get like 100% of their production.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a fair assumption, but it doesn't mean they can't exist.
No, that's what I mean. Like even if it's 80% of like the sum of the parts, it's still insane. Like it's still really good.
Yeah, like we're probably not going to see Tyreek Hill put up the numbers last. Like I think if you look at some of the rates of just like target conversion into like resulting in first downs or touchdowns, he's one of the highest in the NFL.
Right.
You know, that's why I call him a possession receiver.
I also think it's going to be fascinating to see if teams treat Miami the way they treated Kansas City last year, which is say, we're going to play too high the whole time, and we're not going to give you the 70-yard Tyreek Hill touchdown. Like, you're going to have to earn it.
I think Mike McDaniel would welcome that.
I think he would as well. I think they would be a lot better at actually taking advantage of that. But
for sure, because I don't think picking apart downfield is going to be that offense. Like, that's not where they're going to live and die.
But the alternative is, right, you go the other way, and you load up to stop all the Mike McDaniel stuff, and all of a sudden Tyreek Hill's one-on-one on the outside all game. And that even with Tua's noodle lets a touchdown waiting to happen any given moment.
That's why I think like even if Tua's not anything special, and again, we don't know what this offense is going to be. We don't know what Tua is. We don't even know what this offense is going to be. We haven't seen Mike McDaniel as a head coach.
Right.
We have good idea of what we're going to see just given his previous stops and just the coaching tree he's been in, but we don't know. The NFL doesn't know. And that kind of adds that intrigue to it, you know. That's going to be to their advantage, and I think with those type of guys, they can kind of do that there. So, I don't know. I think they can be better than some people are expecting, even if Tua isn't, you know, breaking out to elite levels. Like, I'm not expecting him to take like a Josh Allen-esque leap. They're different players, but you know what I'm talking about, just like as far as the growth goes in that third year. I don't think we're going to see that. But if he can get to a serviceable, good level to the point where we can say, okay, Tua's a starter where he's mid-tier, but in any given year he can produce at that top 10 level in the right situation, then, I mean, this is probably going to be a really good football team.
I want to finish this off by talking a little bit about running backs. But first, you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use the promo code NFLPod. It's the best way right now that you can support the PFF NFL Podcast. Go and give us credit for the subscriptions that you're signing up for. What do you get with a PFF subscription? We get all of PFF's locked article content. You get fantasy football rankings and projections. You get data and grades for the entire 2021 season, the upcoming 2022 season, and all the archives back to 2006 for the NFL, and much, much more. We've got a ton of really cool stuff on the horizon that they're working on behind the scenes. Now is the time to get in. You get the college football preview magazine that you've been working hard on. You get the draft previews, everything we do in terms of that stuff. So sign up right now, use the promo code NFLPOD, and you get 25% off any subscription, and we get some credit. So it's win for everybody. So this is the PFF NFL Podcast. We don't talk about running backs because running backs don't matter, apparently, right? So it's a running back hate zone generally. But, you know, you bring something different to the table. You haven't been corrupted by the hate for running backs. So I want to talk a little bit about.
So you want to bring me into that? Like I've never had to hate on running backs in college football. Like I said, they matter.
You can bring optimism to the table. I'm not leading you one way or the other.
It's hard to do.
If you get corrupted, it's not on me. It's your weakness. I'm just bringing you in as a different voice, one that people don't hear very often.
All right, let's talk running backs.
So yeah, I want to talk about some NFL running backs because all of a sudden you look around, you know, you got Derrick Henry returning, obviously, after the first injury of his career, first serious one. Nick Chubb dominating. Joe Mixon had a great season. You know, Dalvin Cook is a phenomenal running back. We might get a healthy Christian McCaffrey back for the first time. Jonathan Taylor was a freak show last year. It's all of a sudden like a really rich period for in this era where like everything is going to committee, right? We've lost all these sort of bell cow running backs to get 350 carries a year. But all of a sudden, there's like an absolute ton of amazing running backs in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's where it's like the whole how much value can they actually generate debate comes into play because, you know, if you talk, like a lot of NFL players, you ask them who the best player is, and I think I actually saw a clip on this on social media. Like some of them said Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis Colts running back. Because you look at what he can do, it's so different from what other running backs do in the NFL that it elevates the position, but it's also, it's like how much more can they do above expectation?
Yeah.
And he does a good job at that. And I think, you know, him kind of getting to that level alongside Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, I think that's where you can start to kind of get away from like, you know, the Colts would be better off just signing an undrafted free agent. Like, no, Jonathan Taylor's obviously like better. He's the best running back in the NFL, in my opinion. But I do agree with the whole thing. Like if some of these guys are healthy, like Christian McCaffrey comes back fully healthy, and you see some of these guys up top that you all mentioned at their best, I mean, there is a slight edge to that. But again, it's also what's he playing in front of, or who's playing in front of him? What's the offensive line like, and all these external factors, the play call, and all of that.
It's like it's back to it's the same story as everything, which is you actually need a little bit of nuance to make the point, and the soundbite of like running backs don't matter doesn't quite do it justice, and we probably haven't done it enough justice on this podcast. But Jonathan Taylor, I think, is a great example of like the truth, if you like, where obviously the Colts had really good run blocking last year. And if you go through like all of Jonathan Taylor's biggest runs, they all have great blocking. There's a giant hole. He gets to hit the second level, and you're like, oh, anybody can make that play. But then when you look at what Jonathan Taylor does once he gets to the second level and like what he turns that run into. So like the most famous one is that play against the Patriots, you know, where it's a really well blocked play up front. Jonathan Taylor gets through to the second level. Immediately, it's going to be like a 7-yard gain no matter what. Like you, me, any running back in the NFL gets a 7-yard gain out of that. And then he hits a cut that takes out two different players. Takes out Dante Hightower, who makes a balls of it, frankly. But takes out him, takes out a safety, and then outruns a corner like 60 yards to the end zone. You're like, okay, whatever you think about the first 7 yards, you know, what that offensive line is getting him, which is the most important, right? Because that's sort of most of everybody's yardage in any given play is the amount that the blocking is going to get you. The difference between what Taylor does and what an average NFL running back does there is significant. And even if you assume that the average running back makes one guy miss, which is a pretty big assumption, even for Taylor, right? The dude broke like 60 tackles or something last year versus however many carries he had. So it's not 1-to-1, right? You're not expecting a guy to break a tackle every carry. So even if you assume that like the average running back breaks the first tackle, well, he still made a second guy miss and then outrun a corner for 60 yards. Most running backs are not making that happen. So when you look at the advanced metrics like rushing over expectation, Taylor was by far the best in the NFL. So like he's got great blocking, and that's probably the most important thing, but he's also maximizing the results of that blocking like nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think his vision's the best in the league. And I remember that play vividly because I was watching that game with a bunch of Colts fans. My family are Colts fans. I'm from Indiana. I'm not a Colts fan. I'm not a fan of any team, but I watched it with a bunch of Colts fans. And I got an argument with my family because they're like, Jonathan Taylor's the best player in the NFL. And I was like, they're like, he should be the MVP. And I was like, whoa, hang on. This run was great. But then they thought I was crazy, even though they asked my opinion on football because I work in football. I know a lot about football, but they could not get off that whole idea that Jonathan Taylor was not the most valuable player in the NFL. And I think it's just the way he takes, it's not only, you know, kind of in those inopportune times, but when he does have good blocking, he takes care of business better than anybody, right? I mean, he knows if everything's going according to plan, he's going to exceed expectations better than anybody else can. You look at, you know, our R&D department has put out a lot of great stuff on like perfectly blocked run plays. I mean, his stuff is off the charts good. And I think that's where he kind of generates his value. But again, there's just so much limitations to what he can do on a down for down basis, on a carry for carry basis, right? And, you know, you look at those big plays and you can see, like, obviously he's a different breed. He's the best at his craft, but the craft is only so valuable to a team. So that's where it all kind of goes back to. So
Well, now I think it gets more interesting for him because the Colts' offensive line is probably worse this year, and probably the worst it's been for a while. So all of a sudden, you're going to get a better idea of what Jonathan Taylor does with less than ideal blocking, and how much can he offset that with the vision and with his ability to make a guy miss and take advantage of whatever is there. But whatever's there is worse than it was before. So instead of all these plays where he's getting like 7 yards where he needs to do anything, now he's getting 2. And it's like a different ball game because you got less space to work. Like, we're going to get a much more interesting look, I think, at Jonathan Taylor this year than we did last year when there was all that MVP talk and him rushing for 1,800 yards and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think too, last year I think the offensive line wasn't anything special at times. I mean, there were some injuries early on. I think that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle of, Quentin Nelson too. Like last year, I don't think Quentin Nelson was like Quentin Nelson, right? As we knew him those first few years when he was on the field. If he can get back to 100%, I think that can kind of offset it. I think that, the left tackle spot's obviously a little bit of a concern. They have Matt Pryor there. They drafted Bernhard Raimann. But, if they can get Quentin Nelson back to someone who I think would be those first 3 years, I think he was on the track to be one of the best players we've ever really seen along the offensive line. If he can get back to that level, that can be game-changing to the run game. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I still think, even if Jonathan Taylor's better than what he was last year, what's that going to do for Indianapolis?
Right. So Jonathan Taylor's your number 1 running back in the league. What's the next what's your top 5 in terms of rankings?
I like this. I like this a lot. Derrick Henry, number 2.
Okay.
Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is one where in those inopportune times, he's going to step up, and he's going to, if somebody makes a mistake, it's not going to be, the play's dead, and he's still going to go out there. He has a better chance to make a play than anybody. He's number 3. McCaffrey at 4 when healthy, just from a pure receiving impact. I mean, that's where running backs really generate their value, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think Kamara for the same reasons at number 5.
That's the biggest, not flaw, but that's the biggest sort of thing that keeps Nick Chubb away from being like the number 1 back in the NFL, I think, is like just in terms of carries, he's every bit as good as Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, but really isn't a factor as a receiver. And if he was just average, as a receiving threat, if he brought almost anything to the table, you'd be like, yeah, Nick Chubb's the best running back in the NFL, but he doesn't. So you always have to have him he's 3. He's 3 or 4. He's just behind those guys, but he's really good. And if all a running back did was carry the ball, he'd be right up there. No Dalvin Cook in your top 5.
Yeah, I was thinking, and I was like, I hate leaving Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones off because they're both good, both great.
Jones, I think at least you can sort of say, he hasn't.
No one's going to fight with you about it.
Yeah, and he's never he doesn't have the workload of some of the other guys. So you can kind of make the case of is he as important as those other guys?
Doesn't have the calves as A.J. Dillon too.
It's true. Or the thighs, the
oh yeah, thighs.
Quads. Quadzilla.
Yeah.
Is he Quadzilla or was that Saquon?
Saquon was Quadzilla,
What
but
was
A.J. Dillon.
He had another nickname that was similar.
He's thick. A.J. Dillon's thick.
He's a big dude.
He is. Yeah.
Big.
I kind of just want to have his legs for a day just to see. It's kind of like we were talking about it before with Steve can't do some things because he's just such a large human.
You're gonna have to get custom-made pants and stuff. That's not fun. You don't know.
Oh yeah,
you gotta get them let out and stuff. You can't just buy jeans.
Yeah,
you gotta get I don't know, not bell bottomed, but bell middled. They've got to, I don't know. Yeah, you've got to do something to those. You can't just put on a pair of Levi's.
But you could squat a small car and you could get some awesome.
And look, there's trade off. There's some good and bad.
I would definitely rather have them than not have them.
I mean, it might be fun to experience. I'm just not sure you want that daily existence, without the payoff.
That's true. Well, he's getting a pretty good payoff.
No, true. But I'm just saying, I generally speaking don't want to have to buy custom made clothes, for anything, for any reason, right? Whatever the reason is, whether it's monstrous Quadzilla thighs, whether it's I've let myself go too much and I'm too fat to fit into regular clothes, whether it's I'm Steve height and I have to go to the big freak store, whatever it is, right? I just want to be able to go into a thing, buy medium and roll out, right?
Yeah. I was like that with my head was it's still really big, but when I was a kid, it was absurdly large. And I remember just getting, I was I just wanted it was snowing, didn't have a toboggan. and was looking for one. I had to get a special made one. And when I play like Pop Warner football, they're like, getting your helmets, and it's like, bud, this one doesn't fit. We don't have anything. We had to go to the high school shed, get a high school helmet out. I mean, it's yeah. Even I was getting my hair cut the other day, and my barber was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna cut your hair a certain way because your orbital bone is like sticking out." It's like, come on, man. I'm paying you to get my hair cut. You're roasting me for my hair. He does a good job.
Dude,
but.
editorializing from a barber is the worst. Like, just cut the hair and shut up. I don't need to be told about anything on my head. I don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't need to hear
My
the fact
barber's
that there's
great,
no
though.
hair anymore.
My barber's Sammy at G Salzanos. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah.
You should go there.
Other than ragging you for your hair. I don't need to go to a barber much these days.
It's not I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to be mean.
Oh, I mean, it's, you know.
It's a good look, though.
It's not like it's a secret, you know. It's pretty difficult to hide at this point. You know, we're in this situation where there's got to be basically no hair.
At least
there is almost no hair.
You can grow facial hair.
That's true.
That's one place I'm lacking. Anyway, what's your top five? Top five running backs.
My top five. I think I'd still default to Derrick Henry as number one. I think he's kind of earned that from the last few years, and one injury probably isn't going to knock him off that spot for me. Taylor probably is number two. Nick Chubb. I really want to put Nick Chubb up there with those guys, but because of the passing stuff, I can't. And I would put Dalvin Cook ahead of Nick Chubb.
Really?
So Henry 1, Jonathan Taylor 2, Dalvin Cook number 3, Nick Chubb number 4, and then if I can get a healthy Christian McCaffrey, I'll give him number 5. I think that's my top 5.
And again, like, just can't argue with it, really. I think Dalvin is kind of high, but like,
dude, Dalvin's so good.
He is.
When you watch him, like, the amount of stuff he makes out of nothing is insane. I really think
you've been a Dalvin fan since the get-go, right? Florida State days.
Yeah, and I just think he's so underrated. Like, I think his stock, when he ran that like 4.45 or whatever, everyone's like, he's maybe not great. It's like, dude, but just watch the tape. That guy's insane. And clearly he doesn't run like a 4.45, right? Whatever game speed is versus tape speed or versus time speed, like Dalvin Cook is faster than his 40 time was, because that guy can run away from pretty much anybody.
His brother James Cook, I think he's going to surprise some people this year.
Same. I've been saying. So my point was, if we watch James Cook, he basically is 80% of Dalvin Cook at everything, right? Like he's kind of 80% the size. He's like maybe 80%. Like he's just 80% of Dalvin Cook. But if you took 80% of Dalvin Cook and said, in any given draft class, what does that look like? It's probably like the best running back, or like the top two, running backs in any draft class is 80% of Dalvin Cook. So if that's what he actually is, he's the best running back the Bills have, and in a great offense probably looks really good.
That's fair. And like I think from like a pure receiver perspective, like his route running ability, I think it surpasses.
Right, and that's the point where that's the one area where he might be actually as good, if not better, than Dalvin, which is where they want to integrate him in the first place. So it's like primed for him to look really good.
Yep.
What are some sort of sleeper running backs do you think might actually have good seasons this year?
I mean, we just talked about him, James Cook.
James Cook's a good one. Definitely.
Dameon Pierce, another rookie.
Oh.
Houston Texans. I think, I was looking at the betting odds like right after the draft, like offensive rookie of the year, and I saw him. I think at the time he was 40-1, and I think he's well outside of that now because people bought onto it. I think he's going to be, again, like you mentioned from the top when we started talking about running backs, we're not seeing those bell cow roles.
Right.
I think just given the nature of what Houston is right now, he could kind of get thrusted into that, bell cow role. And with his ability too, like I don't think there's one area of his game where you're like, that's an issue. We can't have him in. Like obvious passing situations, he can hold his own in there. I think he's an all-around runner. I think from a pass protecting ability, I think he's NFL ready. He showed that at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was phenomenal in that regard. As a receiver, he can do it. I mean, this past year, honestly, if he would have been like a bell cow for Florida, he probably could have been the first running back off the board because if he could have sustained the level he was at, which was our highest graded running back in college football last year. He just had 100 carries. So that's always a puzzling thing as to why they didn't give him enough run. But he's one to me where I think some people may be sleeping on him just because he is, a fourth-round pick. I think he could exceed expectations. I think him and James Cook are two rookies and two running backs in general in the NFL that I would consider sleepers that could exceed expectations.
It's sometimes really frustrating because guys, when you look at these sort of players and you think, this guy's going to a sort of great situation in terms of competition or like how good he is versus the people around him. Like he could become, something better than people are projecting. They're almost invariably attached to a crappy offensive line, right? Like I think Khalil Herbert looked really good last year for the Bears. And like, okay, I like David Montgomery. I think he's a solid player, but like Herbert could surpass him pretty easily and become, a really good player. But you're like, but Chicago's offensive line is garbage. So like, even if he does, he's not going to have a great season.
That's when the running backs don't matter debate comes in. And I think the phrase, obviously we've talked about it, has some issues with it, but
it's kind of like it doesn't matter who you put behind that line. The guy's not going to dominate.
Exactly.
Which was the Najee Harris point last year, right? Like Najee Harris ended up with a ton of yardage, right? But what do you have, like 3.9 yards per carry?
Yeah.
Because the Steelers' offensive line stinks. So it didn't matter if he was a first-round talent or not. Like he's not going to fix your run game.
And I'm concerned about that group, honestly, this year. I mean, we're kind of going off on a tangent, but last year's offensive line, just in general, from like a pass protecting perspective, too. I mean, Big Ben was just getting rid of the ball as quickly as possible.
I think that's a real concern for them this year.
Kenny Pickett.
It's also why I think Pickett doesn't start week 1.
I think, and if he does, I mean, I've never been a huge fan of Pickett all throughout the pre-draft process. But if he does start, I think it could get a little ugly just with the nature of his play style, which is he's not a quick processor. He's not getting the ball out quickly.
It's impossible to overstate how big a difference that would be going from Roethlisberger, who averaged 2.25, I think, seconds per throw last season or per play, which is the fastest in the NFL, and the fastest by a pretty big chunk, right? Like about a tenth of a second faster than everybody else, which doesn't sound like much, but over a million plays, it's a lot. So he goes from the fastest to Kenny Pickett, who if he continued like the college, it was 3.2 or something in college, which usually gets longer when you go from college to the NFL. So he would go from they would go from protecting for the fastest quarterback in the NFL to the slowest, probably by a distance.
Almost a second.
Yeah. Well, potentially longer than a second if he takes longer at the NFL level. Like that's a huge difference in terms of pass blocking. Like particularly for a guy who, I mean, Pickett's not a bad athlete, but he's not like Lamar or,
Josh guys
Allen.
that have those long average times.
Yeah, he's not like an absolute freak show who like it's going to be 3.5 seconds because he's running around like Russell Wilson, right? It's like, no, it's going to be 3.5 seconds, and for 2.5 of those seconds, he's going to be running for his life. Like, it's not going to be good. So that to me could be a real problem. I mean, they've tinkered with the offensive line, bringing in guys like James Daniels can't hurt, but that could be like a real shock to the system for that offense. All right, Treash, this has been a pleasure, sir. Where can people find you?
Twitter, I guess, at PFF_Anthony. Not going to give out my address, but
no, I wouldn't do that.
You can find me on Twitter.
I mean, you never know. People might send you some stuff. Somebody sent me a hat recently.
Another one?
Just for being that one. Just for being bald. They sent me a hat. So, we've got some nice
No one
listeners.
can send me a hat because, I mean, unless it's like one of those with like a big
freak hat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And in the show on the positive. No, on Twitter, at PFF_Anthony. This was fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. We needed a Steve stand in, and you're not bringing the same size to the table in terms of height and weight. But I think you filled in well. I think you've done a good job. Maybe, I don't know if you've Wally pipped him, but you've definitely been a good addition to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome, anytime. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed that. Steve will be back next week. Next show. Steve will be back on Thursday. I'll be out of here, and then we'll both be back reunited, I believe, next Monday. So keep sending us in emails, NFL Podcast at PFF.com. Hit us up on Twitter and send us in your bets for things that we've got completely wrong, things that Treash was wrong about. Send us on all the emails. We love hearing from you. Hope you've enjoyed listening. Talk to you next time.